Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again. My name is Vaishali, and having learned quite a few things from, through, and from within human interactions, and having pursued and completed my master's in business administration and in clinical psychology, I today wish to talk about sabotage, what it sounds like and what it looks like. So, what essentially is sabotage then? Sabotage, in its meaning, essentially means deliberately destroying or obstructing something, growth, an operation, procedure, or production. Now, many a time, sabotage can be deliberate, can be purposefully done because there's an intention, a purpose behind obstructing, behind destroying, behind curtailing growth, behind curtailing operations, behind curtailing production. And yet, many a times, it's unconscious. For many a times, most of our lives, we are operating from 97 to 95% of our subconscious and our unconscious. So many a times, sabotage can happen through unawareness because it's not in our conscious awareness. To be able to stop that, to be able to curtail that, to be able to withhold it. So then how does it work? Well, mostly it works unconsciously. Mostly it operates out of our awareness, out of our knowingness, out of our conscious knowledge, and thereby to some degree ignorance. So putting it simply over here, which does not necessarily means that it's simple and that it's easy, but just putting it simply, that many a times when we do not know, KNOW know, of how to say no, N-O no, at the right time, or at least in our right time, in your right time, in the right spaces, or at least in your right spaces, in our right spaces, and in the right situations, or at least in your right situations, in our right situations. We do not know what to say yes to, or rather, we lose the capacity to say the right yeses at our right time, at our right space, at our right situation. When our no, a clear no, N-O no, does not express itself clearly, our yeses cannot express themselves clearly as well. When our no's, N-O, no's, are conflicted, our yeses will also be conflicted. For we then lose the capacity to negotiate. To negotiate our negotiables and our non-negotiables. To negotiate what's acceptable, how much of that is acceptable, and what's not acceptable, and how much of that is not acceptable. When our no's, N-O no's, do not have value weightage because they are not backed by the weight of your values, your yeses will lose their values as well. Because our no's essentially communicate our boundaries, our values, our negotiables. All of that in context to what we are willing to tolerate and what we are not. How much of something we are willing to tolerate, invest it, and how much we are not. And the reasons for those yeses and nos are determined by our values, which of course with time also evolves. Also, let's equally realize, let's equally understand that when we do not say the no's that we wish to say, that we want to say, and rather end up saying yes to the things that we actually want to say no to, we are being ingenuine, we are being inauthentic, and thereby we lose the credibility in keeping with trust, in keeping with the aspect of building trust, on a very personal level, firstly, and then even within our interpersonal relations. It's also important to understand, it's also important to reflect that when we are not saying the no's that we wish to speak, that we wish to convey, we essentially end up becoming a people pleaser if we do it very frequently, if we do it unconsciously. And as Oprah Winfrey had said, the disease to please, which is a chronic thing and not a one time event, not only makes us a people pleaser, a chronic people pleaser, but it also leads us into places wherein we overstretch and overextend ourselves. We thin ourselves out a lot. And if I can just illustrate this through an example, wherein I wish to thin out this piece of ginger, I would literally need to pound this, to beat it up, to crush it in order to thin it out. I would quite literally need to bash it up, to pound it down, to beat it up, to crush it in order to thin it out. And this is essentially what we do to ourselves, to our psyche internally when we have a disease to please. When there's a certain fear associated with regards to saying no, fear of being disliked, fear of being rejected, fear of being neglected, fear of being criticized, fear of being abandoned, fear of being thought of as a bad one, fear of being criticized, fear of condemnation. And we keep saying yes when essentially we want to say no most days of our lives. This is what is happening internally within us, in our own psyches, and not just in our own psyches, but within our own body, within our own physiology as well. Next, it also helps us reflect, or it should help us reflect. It should want us to reflect that when I am saying yes to things where essentially I want to say no, there is somebody else within the picture or not within the picture, tangible or intangible, that is making that choice for us, that is speaking yes on our behalf. And it can be a tangible person, a tangible relationship, or plus and. It can also be our cultural conditioning, our family conditioning, our societal conditioning, which is operating from our subconscious, that is saying yes. The voices of others, of these conditionings, that is saying yes, when personally we wish to say no. And if this happens in chronic ways, most days of our lives, in most choices of our lives, we not only lose our autonomy, our authenticity, but we also build up resentment for ourselves and for others and for the relationships that we are operating and functioning in. We feel drained and we feel burnt out. And many times we may also feel that our life has no meaning and thereby no purpose as well, because we don't have a say most of the times in our own lives itself, in our own life choices itself, which can lead up to a whole lot of psychological distress and disorders, and not just psychological disorders and distresses, but even physical distresses and disorders. Which makes me think of this beautiful quote that when you say yes to others, make sure that you're not saying no to yourself. make sure that you're including yourself in that yes, wholly and completely, at least most days of your life, when you are saying yes to others. So maybe here's a little takeaway. If we can only reflect when we have not communicated our no's in no nonsensical, yet very gentle and firm ways, we have failed to communicate our yeses as well in very firm and no nonsensical ways as well. When we have not been able to say no clearly, yet gently and firmly, we have not been able to stand for our yeses by our yeses, firmly and gently as well. When we have not been able to speak our no's clearly, we have allowed somebody else to cross over our boundaries, and we ourselves have crossed over those boundaries, our own ones that we had put for ourselves, and transgressed the boundaries that others had even communicated. Because when we do not learn to say no properly, when we do not learn to communicate no in no nonsensical, gentle and firm ways, we are not able to receive somebody else's no gently and firmly in the same breath. For when we have not established our own boundaries, we quite naturally get bad or get repulsed when somebody else communicates their boundaries clearly, no nonsensically, gently and firmly, assertively. So think about all of the places, all of the spaces, all of the situations, all of the relationships wherein your yeses had become meaningless, had become weightless, because your no's, N-O no's, had become valueless, had become meaningless, had become weightless, and thereby had become worthless as well. When your no's did not come from an integrated place, did not come out of integrity, your yeses, or rather our yeses, will not hold much integrity in themselves as well. So let's take a moment, or rather let's take a few moments, maybe a few days, maybe even a few months, to keep penning down, to keep jotting down where we had lost our yeses because we did not value our no's as much, because we did not hold our no's with equal amount of weightage and with equal amount of value as we ourselves would have liked to do. Let's try and reflect on all of those aspects, and I will see you once again the next week. Till then, stay tuned in. And guys, if you do like the contextual content of these videos, please do like, share and subscribe.